Hi everyone, it's LadyJenevia. A new episode of The Boys has dropped, and as usual, it was top quality content. And since Amazon's publicists never responded to my emails with screener links, even though they said they would send them when I first submitted my request for access, I'm just going to do every review for the rest of this season with spoilers, so consider that your disclaimer if you needed one. If you are new here, I have done a lot of videos about The Boys already, multiple video essay reviews on season 1, and I'm also doing weekly reviews on season 2, so feel free to subscribe to follow along, and I will also link a playlist to my reviews of the show up in a card, so feel free to watch if you haven't already. Now on to season 2, episode 4, and I'm just going to talk my way through each of the main characters and what I thought when watching their material for the first time. Once again, let's start with the worst character. I was very annoyed in the season 2 premiere when there was so much content for the Deep because I don't like him. Going into season 2, I was really hoping that they were going to address the aftermath of him being assaulted because that seemed like something really interesting to explore that we don't get to see a lot, particularly for male characters. And I'm still disappointed that they didn't take that route, and I still think it's gross that they went the route of having the explanation for why he assaults women be that he hates his body. However, this episode had this recurring presence of women speaking to the camera about love and relationships, and at first I thought, well, maybe these are women at some sort of support group and we're going to meet a new character, or maybe this Liberty character they're going on about is going to be at this gathering of women. Instead, I was shocked to find out these women were members of this church auditioning to be the Deep's wife as part of a strategy to help his public image. Now, I'm not going to say what this commentary is clearly referencing because I don't want to end up on a list, but if you know, you know. I said last week that I did not care about the Deep getting into religion, but now that I know what it is that they are referencing, I'm officially intrigued. Next, let's talk about Butcher finally learning where Becca is, a VOT facility. There are a few things to point out about their reunion. It makes sense that this is where she has been for all this time because it's completely off the grid. You would not be able to keep a superpowered child hidden, particularly when you factor in that we are living in an age of social media. It would get out somehow. The kid would figure something out. Someone would recognize Becca. The risks are just too high. Butcher mentions to Becca a description of where the boys have been hiding out. What you need to remember about great writing and great filmmaking is that you never include or show anything without a reason. So I think she's going to sell out their location probably closer to the end of the season. It won't be because of anything malicious. It will be because her son is in danger and being threatened, and she thinks that this will save him. Becca and Butcher hooked up again, and then they had a conversation where she says, "I know you hate kids," and he says, "I don't hate kids." She's going to get pregnant again. That's my prediction for the time being. It just felt too foreboding a conversation for that hookup to not have some serious consequences. And when they first brought Becca back, I was starting to get this nagging irritation about how they didn't ever give her a voice to outright express what happened with her and Butcher. Was it an affair? Was it assault? Mind you, I always assumed that it was assault, but it was still of the utmost importance that she would say so. And I'm glad she finally did in this episode. I also think she's spot on when she decides to stay because you have to think practically here. Her situation is bad either way. If they leave, what is she supposed to do? Go on the run with the rest of these fugitives? What kind of life is that for a child? They're also presumed dead, and she has no ability to contain her son if anything goes sideways with his powers. She does not have superpowers. I like that she exposed Butcher, though, because in watching the first season, I had always assumed that his rage and darkness was something that came from losing his wife. But she put his business out there and said that the hate that he carries started long before she met him. She said he was the type of person to get into a fight in a parking lot if a confrontation were to spring up. This is way more interesting. It shows that Butcher has a lot of work he needs to do on himself, and that falling in love is not a magical cure-all for your problems or your psychological issues. That's a recurring thing we see in this episode, by the way, as is the exploration exploration of the characters and their emotions and their psychology, and I really like that about it. We'll talk more about these things as they apply to other characters in a bit, but first, let's talk about some of the other members of the Seven who didn't necessarily have as much material in this episode, but were still interesting for one reason or another. If you remember last week, I said I wanted to see more Black Noir content, and we got it. I was not expecting to see him seeking out Butcher on his own the way that he did by visiting that worker in IT. She was also eating an Almond Joy, and they kept mentioning that candy. I don't know why. I can't imagine it's going to be some sort of significant plot point in the overall dramatic narrative. It feels more like an inside joke. Maybe Eric Kripke or the episode writer really loves Almond Joys and people make fun of them for it, so they just really wanted to assert dominance by declaring on this large platform that Almond Joys are good. I don't like them, but how could I? I don't like almonds. Putting all that aside, I really hope we keep getting more Black Noir content because I'm enjoying it. Next up, we have A-Train, who has been kicked out of the Seven. I'm assuming they're going to go down a path of exploring who he is without the Seven. At first, I thought they might change their mind and bring him back for good PR, since they got clocked on television for not being more diverse with their lineup. But by the time the episode was finished, I just don't think Homelander would concern himself with those particular PR details at this point. I think he is more preoccupied with other things. With A-Train's storyline, I found it very funny that when he was being told about the many things he would get to do, one of those things was a reality show on VOT Plus. Of all the names you could have given to a streaming platform for the evil corporation that is VOT, they chose VOT Plus. That's a read. Next, we have Maeve, and her main story in this episode was that television appearance with Homelander. When he outed her on television, I was so caught off guard. I just kept yelling, "Shh," out loud. Once again, Homelander continues to be terrible. But what I did like about this story is that, as far as I could tell, Homelander has now moved past his creepy obsession with Maeve. I do think that her on and off again girlfriend is in danger, but only in the sense that Homelander is the type of person who will use any leverage against anyone if he wants to threaten, blackmail, or get revenge on them. And that storyline between those two characters never felt sustainable. At some point, there would need to be a conflict of sorts between Homelander and Maeve. I hope they leave it alone, though, because if you don't, then you're falling right back into the bury your gays trope. And The Boys has mostly shown that it's intelligent enough to not rely on lazy, archaic tropes. At this point, it feels like Homelander has moved on because Maeve never really angered him enough for him to prioritize going after her. He's dealing with a lot of other things now, like not having Madeline around anymore. And of course, he is very preoccupied with Stormfront. So let's talk about her next. We start to learn a bit more about her backstory. Apparently, she ages very slowly since she was already around in the 1970s, operating under the name Liberty, and she murdered an innocent black man. Probably more than one, but at least in this episode, they only showed us just that one. They're pacing this really well of peeling back the layers on her character's history and the extent of her depravity and her cunning mind. Clearly, she's very good at adapting. Most people did not know that she was Liberty, at least that we're aware of at this point, but she tells Homelander that he needs to change with the times and that this is something that she did. We can see that this is true because she knows exactly how to rile up her audience and weaponize their devotion to her to suit her agenda and spread her ideology. The fact that she's got her people making memes on her behalf demonstrates that she's got her thumb on the pulse of the culture, as do the show's writers. Also, it was very funny to see Homelander getting increasingly enraged by those memes. I could have sworn that there have been different politicians who have tried to ban memes that were making fun of them in the real world, not just in the show. I didn't know you could ban memes though, since the Streisand effect is a thing, but fair enough. Speaking of Homelander, wow, really? Forcing Doppelganger to play dress up as Madeline? Calm down, Norman Bates. I'm really enjoying this back and forth between Homelander and Stormfront though. I cannot really tell at this point if they're going to keep trying to out-strategy each other, or if eventually they're just going to have a full-on fist fight, or if they're going to do something else a bit more salacious. Remember that she said to him that her door is always open for whatever. That's not ominous at all. Come to think of it, we haven't seen much when it comes to superheroes fighting other superheroes on this show to their full strength. It feels like the show is biding its time before we'll get to see that level of a fight between two superpowered individuals. But if we get to see a brawl between Homelander and Stormfront this season, I feel like it will be one of the most epic battles we've seen on a television show ever, or at least this year. And should I talk about Anthony Starr wearing lingerie in this episode? I mean, what is there to say? Let's talk about Mother's Milk and how much I love him. We finally got more of his backstory, and it was long overdue. He ended up having one of my favorite developments in this episode because for much of the series, he's been the mother hen and the therapist of the group. It's nice to see the dynamic shift where he finally opens up about where he comes from and what he struggles with beyond the same struggles that all of the boys face from being fugitives trying to take Vought down. I would have to go back and rewatch the show's first season to see if there were any clues that he struggles with OCD before now. I cannot really tell if this is something that they always planned to do or something that they decided would work well for this season specifically, but either way, I'm glad we're getting to see him be more vulnerable, like how he said that his father also had OCD, and that's where he got it from. We finally understand why he got into this fight against Vought in the first place, and that scene between him and Annie talking about their fathers in the cafe was really touching. Definitely my favorite episode for Mother's Milk from the entire series so far. Moving on to Annie, when Homelander confronted her in the elevator, I was so tense because when his hand started to move down, I got really anxious that he was going to assault her, not just physically. How twisted of a show is this that I was relieved when it was just regular assaulting? Good grief. But Annie's getting really good at bluffing against the other members of the Seven. First A-Train in the premiere, and now Homelander. I'm glad we got to see her spend so much time with Mother's Milk and Huey in this episode. For one, it progresses her bonding with the boys, since it seems clear that we're building our way up to her integrating further into their squad. I don't know for sure if that means that she will become a fugitive with them, but I did see a still image floating around of her in the boys' lair with her mom, and that to me sounds like she's going to get found out as a double agent and have to become a fugitive, at least for the time being. So why else are you going to get your mom involved when you're on the outs with her right now? I loved all of the interactions between Huey and Annie. They've really won me over compared to how I felt when I first watched season 1 for the first time. It was really cute how embarrassed he was when she said that she got his voicemail, but the fact that he was going to leave when they had their secret meeting, but stopped and then came back over to see if she was okay because he could tell that she was very much not okay. Wow, we love an emotionally intelligent man. When he saw that Annie was also singing along to Billy Joel in the car, I feel like that was the moment when his inner monologue went, oh my god, that's wifey right there. And it was nice to finally see them back together as a couple, even if it was only temporary. The speech she gave him at the end of the episode gave me major Bird Box vibes. I'm going to talk about Bird Box spoilers, so fast forward to the timestamp on the screen if you don't want to have that film spoiled, even though it's not a new film. Annie says to Huey, we can't afford to feel good or safe or let our guard down. You know how Sandra Bullock's character in Bird Box is very cold and distant with the children because their very survival depends on her meticulously training them until they can get somewhere safer? Well, Annie is more or less doing the same thing to Huey. Mind you, if she gets found out as a double agent and has to go on the run with the boys, I think that they will be able to get back together, because at that point, why not? But at least for now, it's not helping her to maintain her cover if she's constantly sneaking off to meet with Huey and texting him on her secret burner phone. Now, unsurprisingly, and in all likelihood what will remain customary for the remainder of these weekly reviews of The Boys Season 2, I have saved Frenchie and Kimiko for last because they're my favorite, and it's a lot easier to stay motivated with writing out my notes for these reviews if I save the best for last. Incredible how they can wreak havoc on my emotions even with such a small percentage of the episode's runtime. I like how when the episode starts, we see that they're paralleled in their suffering. Kimiko's go-to coping mechanism when she's upset or feels unsafe is to hide under a table. We've seen her do that before. She was under a table when the boys found her imprisoned, and she was also hiding under a table when she was running away from them in the train station. Frenchie's coping mechanism is hedonism, and more specifically, drugs and pleasures of the flesh. Am I furious that the showrunners decided to have him try to kiss her now with the absolute worst timing imaginable? Partially yes, but also I get it. They know that Frenchie and Kimiko are so iconic of a couple that they cannot just have them be perfect all the time. It makes all other couples in fiction look bad if they are constantly setting such an unattainable standard. And at least he apologized when she made it very clear that now is not the time for that. Butcher said that Frenchie has been high as a kite for days, so clearly the stress of the situation is getting to him. Not to mention the woman that he loves is in the worst pain that she's been in since he has met her. I really like that The Boys is pushing this narrative that romantic love is not a magical cure to external or internal problems. Romantic love is beautiful, and the show clearly reveres it, but I appreciate this approach to depicting it. I find it very refreshing. I'm glad that Frenchie got the advice to just let her grieve, and maybe now he will realize that he needs to work on himself. And Tomer said at the show's Comic-Con panel that Frenchie will need to work on his trauma. So I'm not really sure how he's going to do that, since you can't exactly go to see a therapist when you're a fugitive on the run, unless maybe Mother's Milk will help counsel him through this, and we'll finally get to see them bonding, just like I said that I wanted. See, I'm following the threads they've been presenting. I was so glad that Frenchie showed up and stopped Kimiko, because now he'll be reinvigorated to support her as she goes on her vengeance quest. When she was storming through the crowd, I knew Kimiko couldn't confront Stormfront this early. Not nearly enough has happened to build up to that confrontation. We also still haven't seen that scene where Frenchie gives her, I think it was a bazooka or some sort of rocket launcher. I don't know, but it was a very big weapon. And I love that the show hypes up men who support the women they love, emotionally or tactically. It's redefining relationship goals. So those are my thoughts on The Boys Season 2, Episode 4. I don't know if you got anything out of this video, but feel free to like and comment to help me out algorithmically speaking. And if you are one of my regular viewers, I've been making a lot of progress on my Knives Out video essay, so I'm definitely aiming to finish it this month. I've been posting updates on Twitter, so follow me on there, as well as Instagram, Letterboxd, and Vero. See you in the next one. Bye.